So back to Valeo, and before looking at the organic growth scenario, let's have our starting point as the WACC calculation that we actually went over during the last video. And we get values for the debt percentage, equity percentage, as well as the cost of each of them. Then we have this new formula to be calculating the beta. We have the cost of equity previously got as almost 20%, the risk-free rate is 6.5% according to the market, the economy, the industry, and so on. And the ERP, which is the equity risk premium, as 10%. This way we get the beta as 1.36, and actually this is the value that shows on the beta for Valeo on Yahoo Financials. Beta represents the risk and shows the volatility of the company. Moving now to the scenario where we decide that Valeo will start growing organically on 2014, that means that we will be having to equate the additional fund needed to zero. And the first modifications that I've done is that on the financing percentages section on the Excel sheet, I need to be having the debt percentage as 0% and the equity percentage as 100%. So we can see that the notes payable and long-term bonds now have a percentage of 0. Another modification that I've done is that the actual values of the notes payable and long-term bonds on the income statement of 2014 are now 0. Then I had to keep changing the forecasted sales growth for each of the 5 years of the planning period to actually get a value of 0 AFN for each of the years. And we can clearly see that the first year, which is 2015, is the most affected year, and this is expected because this is the turning point where we move from being 30% leaning on debt to having to operate without debt at all. We moved here from a 20% growth rate to negative 12.57% growth rate, and this means that we're going to be holding production, but actually the EBIT value we're going to get is positive. We're just growing much slower than we used to before. We can see the effect of these changes on each of the 5 years of the forecasted balance sheet for the planning period. The borrowings are actually 0 now in each year, and that means that the total assets is equaling now the total liabilities and equity, and that also means that the company is using what it actually has to be growing instead of leaning on debt and borrowings. As we did many times before in the process of valuation, we get the EBIT values from the forecasted income statement of each of the 5 years, and that is automatically generated on Excel. We plug the values. We deduct from it tax, and then we deduct the change in working capital, and that is the difference between current assets between 2 consecutive years, and that is excluding cash. We deduct as well capital expenditure, and we add depreciation and amortization, and these are the values that we got for the free cash flow of each. Again, we plugged the values in Excel, and the equations gave us a present value for each of the years. We then added the 5 years to get the present value for the planning period. We forecasted the value of 700 million euros for year 6, and that gave us the present value for residuals as well. Adding the two values would give us the present value for Valeo of 7,281 million euros. We can see that is much lower than the actual value for Valeo, which is 11 billion euros almost. And that makes sense because we are now removing the debt and we're not leaning on borrowings anymore. We're just growing organically. If we look at the share price, we divide the present value that we get by the 78 million shares that Valeo has, and we get a number of 93 euro per share. If we compare it to the actual share price of 139 euros, we could see that this is a decrease by 33%. Again, it totally makes sense to be decreasing in the share price, and this is the value that the company would worth if it decides to grow organically. Thank you.